Anu is Yahweh, not Enlil. Let's end this lie once and for all. An in-depth study of comparative mythology will reveal that the original identity of the biblical god Yahweh can only be Anu, the wrathful god of heaven of the Sumerian pantheon. The truth is that Anu shares many striking similarities with Yahweh, not only with regards to his personal traits, but also on a mythological level. Whereas the only characteristics which Enlil shares with Yahweh are his wrathful and authoritarian personality and his military skill. This is the reason for which many people confuse him with the biblical god and forget about Anu completely. We must take into account that the tetragrammaton Yahweh, vocalized as Yahweh, isn't the original name of the Hebrew god, but rather a Semitic epithet whose meaning is he who makes exists, or he who creates. This pseudonym is an abbreviation of Yahweh Sebaot, or who creates hosts. This divine title reflects the warlikeness of the warrior god of Israel, who describes himself a man of war. The original name of God of the Bible was El, or sometimes it's plural from Elohim. Who was El originally? In the pre-biblical Semitic religion, El was the highest god of the pantheon and the progenitor of the 70 Elohim, or junior gods, along with his divine wife Asherah. El was regarded as the king of the pantheon, the god of heaven, a deity of agriculture, the president of the assembly of the gods, and a great judge and divine warrior by the Phoenicians, the Philistines, and the early Hebrews. His most common epithets included El, Yahweh, a warlike title which means El, who creates the hosts, and the precursor of the biblical Yahweh Sebaot, father of years, a variant of the Jevitic epithet ancient of days found in the book of Daniel, and father of all the Elohim. It is important to note that the cult of El in ancient Levant was characterized by human sacrifice and the holocaust of firstborn males in the particular, and this perverse practice would be inherited by the Hebrews in their later Jevitic cult, and infanticidal titan Kronos in the Hellenic mythology of the neighboring Greek world. We have just established that El and Yahweh are the two names of the same divine character, and the biblical god El Yahweh has his origin in the pre-Israelite Semitic pantheon of the ancient Levantine region. Moreover, we already know that El Yahweh was identical to Kronos, the highest titan of the Greek pantheon. Just like El in the Levantine Semitic pantheon and Kronos in the Hellenic mythology, Anu was regarded as the king of heaven and the highest god of Sumero-Akkadian pantheon. Enlil, on the other hand, never arrived to occupy the throne of heaven and was always god number 2 in the divine hierarchy. Besides, very similar to El Yahweh, Anu was known as the Lord of the heavenly host, feared as great judge who created the armies of the sky so that they would punish sin, revered as the highest president of the divine council, and praised as the progenitor of all the Anunnaki. Here we see an exact correspondence with many of the characteristics of El Yahweh in the Western Semitic religion. It is appropriate to say that none of their traits belong to El. The Sumerian sky god Anu and the highest Semitic deity El were considered the same personage in the northern regions of Mesopotamia. In fact, the Akkadian root Elu, from which the Semitic theonym El is derived, has its origin in the Sumero-Akkadian religious culture and was associated with Anu. The cuneiform ideogram for the name of that deity was polyvalent and could be read as Anu or Elu, demonstrating a close relationship on a linguistic level. The truth is that El is Anu. Period. What is certain is that the biblical god has nothing to do with the Sumerian god Enlil apart from being his biological father. There still remain more exact similarities between El Yahweh and Anu. In the Semitic religion, El was represented by a solar disk, often with wings whose center contained a pointed star. In the book of Amos, we read that the god whom the Hebrews worshipped was represented by a kind of star. Likewise, the Sumerian god Anu was represented by the same pointed star inside a solar disk. In the Semitic religion, El, just like his Greek equivalent Kronos, was associated with the planet Saturn. The truth is that Judaism has always been a cult of Saturn from its beginning. The sacred day of El Yahweh is Saturday, the day of Saturn, called Dia Saturn in Latin and Chrono in classical Greek. Many people know that Sabbath comes from Sabbath, whose meaning is day of rest, but very few people know that this Hebrew root shares its etymology with the ancient term Shabbatai, the name of the god and the planet Saturn in Hebrew. Besides, in the Kabbalah, Jewish mysticism, Yahweh Elohim is associated with the Sephirah Bina, and by extension with Saturn. In Greco-Roman mythology, the titan Saturn Kronos immolated and devoured his own children out of fear that they would surpass him and usurp his throne. The Saturnic cult has always maintained its sickly obsession with ritual infanticide. That same practice of blood sacrifice would be conserved in the Jevitic cult of primitive Judaism, and then it would continue through an esoteric and esoteric sense with Christianity. In the end, the biggest secret of Judaism is that its cult is satanic worship, parallel to this in the Mesopotamian tradition and sky god. The sky god Anu was associated with the planet Saturn. Since ancient times, Saturn has always been considered by the secular nation as the most high planet and a dark, malefic force of tyranny. It is important to note that the counter doctrines have been formed against Yahweh to delegitimize his claim of supremacy over creation. According to some late Mesopotamian records, Anu was conceived to be a violent usurper who defeated a predecessor called Alalu in a struggle for the throne of heaven. Parallel to this, in the Hellenic mythology, the warlike titan Kronos, a divine personage identical to the Semitic deity El, was a bloodthirsty tyrant who beat his own father in the battle in order to usurp the heavenly throne and devoured his own children out of fear that they may grow more powerful than him and take from him the throne. In the book of Genesis, El Yahweh is against the idea of Adam eating from the tree of knowledge and then berets the serpent for having granted to mankind the science of gods and then denies man the fruit of tree of life, which is the key to immortality. In the legend of Adapa, the original Sumerian version of the story of Adam, the king of heaven, Anu is the god who doesn't want Adapa to have the heavenly knowledge, complains that the Ushumgal, or great serpent of the sanctuary of Arida, has revealed to man the design of heaven and earth and makes Adapa return to the earth without receiving the water and bread of life. In the end, Yahweh and Anu are the same personage who plays the same role both in Genesis and in the original Sumerian version. Anu Yahweh is the strict god of heaven who punishes rebellion, opposes the Gnostic alignment of man by the rebellious serpent, and thus became bitter enemies with the serpent and denied humanity the source of immortality. According to the biblical account, El Yahweh decides to send the deluge in order to wipe out mankind and the animal life. All flesh which became completely genetically corrupt after the incursion of Azazel's watchers at Mount Hermon and the production of the Nephilim and the animal mutants. In the Sumerian flood stories, such as the one found in Nippur, we see that Anu is the god who presides over the divine council and makes the decision to destroy all life on earth, save 8 persons and a pair of every clean animal kind. On a large wooden ark, Enlil, on the other hand, occupies the second position in the council of the Anunnaki and is subordinate to his father Anu. In the end, although Enlil was still allied with the Anu at that time and supported the decision of his father in that moment, he was not the god who approved the genocide, and Anu alone was the true responsible party for the devastating cataclysm. However, authors like Sitchin cease to mention the central role of Anu in the decision to send the flood and place all the blame on Enlil. It is evident that Yahweh can be none other than Anu, the king of heaven and biological father of Enki and Enlil. In brief, El Yahweh and Anu not only have many of the same traits, of which very few are applicable to Enlil, but also play the same role in the ancient stories as the concealed overlord who desires to keep humanity in definite punishment for rebelling against him, opposed the granting of the divine science by the serpent of wisdom, and denied man the source of immortality from the tree of life until he sent his son Yeshua, or Jesus, to shed his blood and offer man access to the immortality through faith in his son. Yahweh is identical to Anu, the total adversary of the human race under the serpent's current dominion. Then what about the Semitic identity of Enlil? Enlil is Baal in the Semitic pantheon. Just like Anu in the Sumerian pantheon, El was considered the father of all the Elohim. His most important sons include Baal, a warrior god, the lord of storms and the vice president of the divine assembly, and Kotar-Wakases, a deity of wisdom, engineering and magic. Baal and Kotar-Wakases, both sons of El, are Levantine Semitic equivalents of Enlil and Enki respectively. Just like Enlil was regarded as the god of wind or the god of the air in the Sumerian village, Baal was revered as a storm deity in the pre-Israelite Semitic pantheon. He was often depicted with a lightning bolt in his hand, just like the Greek titan Zeus, son of Kronos in the Hellenic pantheon. Just like Enlil, who was respected for his great bravery as a divine warrior of the second generation and called the Bull of Heaven, Baal was considered a young warrior and represented by the calf in the Semitic religion. Here Enlil is very akin to Baal with regards to his divine characteristics and his function, and is not comparable to Yahweh, given that the Hebrew god, just like his pre-biblical precursor El, is described as the Ancient of Days, whose hair is like the pure wool in the book of Daniel, and as a great god whose years are unsearchable in the book of Job. What is certain is that Enlil cannot be Yahweh, since he is a young warrior and the second generation of pantheon. El-Yahweh and Anu, on the other hand, are older characters of the first generation, and El-Yahweh in particular is represented as an aged patriarchal god and called Ab-Shalom, or father of year. Just like Enlil, who occupied the second highest position in the council of the Anunnaki and presided at the side of his father Anu, Baal was the vice president of the assembly of Elohim and resigned over the council along with his father El, but never managed to surpass him and always remained subordinate to his father. Here we see that the relationship between El and Baal in the Semitic religion is identical to that between Anu and Enlil in the Sumerian pantheon. In the biblical epic, their relationship changes completely. In the Bible, Baal is represented as the false god of the foreign heathen, slandered as a preserved idol of the Philistines, and his name is denigrated as Baal-Zev or Beelzebub, a play on words in Hebrew and a mocking expression whose meaning is Lord of the Flies. Some biblical scholars propose the possibility that Baal-Zev is a disrespectful corruption of the divine title Baal Zebul, which means Lord of the High Places, an epithet similar to Enlil. In the Hebrew Bible, Baal is accused of human sacrifice, and in Christianity, he is slandered as the prince of demons and the devil Satan. Here we encounter once more the accusatory inversion, very typical of Anu Yahweh. Despite the fact that El-Yahweh had always been a god whose cult was characterized by the spilling of blood sacrifices to appease him, he accuses his son Baal of the same desires and blames him for his own acts of evil. In the end, El-Yahweh and Baal are now enemies, and later joined his benevolent half-brother Enki, the great serpent of the divine sun. The pantheon revisited. If we look at the structure of the highest tier of the respective pantheons of the region in antiquity and analyze the roles and the general characteristics of each deity comparatively, we soon become aware that Enlil cannot be the biblical god, Yahweh, and is much more akin to Baal in the Semitic pantheon and to Zeus in Greek mythology. The Mesopotamian, Semitic, and Greek pantheons have practically the same structure. The highest tier of male deities is comprised of a triad of three gods who have their constant and well-marked individual characteristics. The highest god is always a supreme and tyrannical heavenly king, a father of all the gods of the pantheon, wrathful in jealousy, and a character associated with the planet Saturn, and in many cases a deity of time. The second personage is a young warrior, the prophet son of the king, a god who has tremendous political power and reigns along with his father in the assembly of the gods, and a deity of tempests. The third personage is always another important son of the king and half-brother of the storm god, a highly benevolent god and a great teacher for mankind, a lord of the sciences, knowledge, construction, and magic, and in many cases a deity of the water, as we can see above. Anu, El, and Kronos share many traits, all being gods of heaven, strict patriarchal kings, wrathful in jealousy, and personages associated with the planet Saturn. Besides, El and Kronos share the title of Father of Time, the practice of blood sacrifice, and the regathering of man in a soul harvest. And El and Anu share the epithet Lord of the heavenly host and oppose the secular enlightenment of man by the serpent of the sanctuary of Eden. Likewise, Enlil, Baal, and Zeus have almost all the same characteristics. All are the sons of the strict king of the heaven and are prefaced by man. They are all young warriors of the second generation. They all stand out for their great military skill. They all occupy a very high position in the divine council, often ruling alongside their father, and they all appear as storm deities. Baal and Zeus wield a devastating lightning bolt by which they defeat their adversaries, and Enlil is a warrior of the tempest. Enki is the Sumero-Akkadian pantheon, Kothar-Wakasses. In the early Semitic religion and the Poseidon in Greek mythology are all important sons of the king of the pantheon. Deities of wisdom, masters of the arts of construction, powerful magicians, lords of the occult sciences, and great friends and benefactors of mankind. Enki and Poseidon are gods of the waters and have special relationship with the aquatic region. Besides, it is believed that their respective names mean the same, Lord of the earth. Enki is composed of the Sumerian roots and Ki, and the Poseidon possibly comes from the primitive root Sis and Da. The original pronunciation of this Greek name was Poseida. In the Levantine region, Kothar-Wakasses was associated with Ta, the Egyptian equivalent of Enki, known as Lord of Serpents and Fishes, Master Builder, and Lord of Magic. In brief, Enlil is not Yahweh but Baal, a god who was condemned and accursed by the people of Yahweh in their Bible, called the Word of Yahweh. Enlil, Baal, has become bitter enemies with the father Anu Yahweh and is now allied with the Enkis in the great cosmic struggle. Enlil is a rebellious warrior god and the deceptive false defender of the human race in rebellion against Anu Yahweh that doesn't conform to the strict ways of his very powerful father, who is not of this world but of that in the heavenly place. The erroneous claim that Enlil is the Sumerian precursor of Yahweh is a cunning lie that must be exposed. In his arrogance, Enlil became aware of the activity of his father Anu Yahweh and joined Enki some several millennia ago. Now Enlil is beside his half-brother Enki and fights against Anu's forces in the cosmic conflict and the chief false liberator of sinful humanity, with both being in open rebellion against Anu's ongoing agenda of supremacy for the earth through Christ, which began at Eden and ends at the conclusion of Gog-Magog.
If you enjoy this video and want to see more like it, please consider subscribing to us and hitting the like button. Feel free to write a comment below and suggest which theory you want to see next. If you'd like to further support this channel, please consider joining. Our membership link will be found in the description box below. We appreciate your support, and as always, thanks for watching.